All right, today we're going to talk about one of the weirdest branches on the entire tree of life. We're diving into Phylum Porifera. Now, you probably know them simply as sponges. And trust me, they are the absolute ultimate minimalist animal. So yeah, let's get right into it.
So let me start with a question for you. Can you think of an animal that has no mouth to eat with, no muscles to move, and, well, no brain to think with? I mean, if you saw one, you'd be forgiven for thinking it was some kind of plant, right? But nope. This is the humble sponge, and it turns out it's one of the oldest and, get this, most successful animals on our entire planet. How wild is that? So how is that even possible? How does an animal like that even exist? Well, to figure that out, we've got to take a look at their incredibly simple blueprint. And the biggest clue is right there in their scientific name, Porifera. It's Latin, and it literally just means pore bearer. And that's basically the whole secret. Their entire body is just built around this system of pores and channels. And that one simple fact is the key to absolutely everything they do.
Okay, so there are three foundational things you gotta keep in mind. First, you can find them in pretty much any body of water, mostly the ocean, but there are some freshwater species too. Second, they're asymmetrical, which just means you can't cut them down the middle and get two equal halves. There's no front, no back, no left or right. And third, and this is the big one, they operate at the cellular level. So you shouldn't think of a sponge as one single organism. It's much more like a highly organized colony of specialized cells all working together. So, a colony of cells, how does that even survive? The answer is their absolutely incredible water canal system. And I'm not exaggerating here. This isn't just a feature of the sponge. It is their entire life support system. And the system itself is it's elegantly simple. So water gets pulled in through thousands and thousands of these tiny little pores called ostia. From there, it flows into a big central cavity, which is known as the spongical seal. And then finally, it's all pushed out through one single large opening called the osculum. It's just in, through, and out. That's the whole process. So why is this constant flow of water such a big deal? Because this one system does three incredibly important jobs all at once. As the water is flowing through, the sponge is filtering out tiny food particles. At the exact same time, its cells are absorbing oxygen from that water, and then it uses that same outbound current to just flush away all of its waste. It's their kitchen, their lungs, and their plumbing all rolled into one. But what actually powers this whole thing? What's the engine? Well, lining the inside of the sponge are millions of these incredible little cells called choanocytes, or collar cells. Each one has a tiny whip-like tail called a flagellum, and the constant, coordinated beating of millions of these tiny whips is what creates the powerful current that drives the entire system. So we know how they eat and breathe, but what about everything else? How do they survive, grow, and make more sponges? Let's take a look at their strategies for support, digestion, and reproduction. Their survival kit is pretty unique. For digestion, it's all intracellular. That means there's no stomach. Each individual cell digests its own food. To keep their shape, they have a skeleton made of either tiny, sharp spicules or these flexible fibers called spongin. That's the stuff that makes bath sponges feel spongy. And for reproduction, fertilization actually happens inside the sponge, which produces a tiny larva that swims off to start a whole new colony somewhere else. And they have two main strategies for this. They can reproduce asexually. A piece can just break off and grow into a whole new sponge. That's called fragmentation. But they can also reproduce sexually. And here's a fun fact. Most sponges are hermaphrodites, meaning one individual can produce both eggs and sperm, though usually at different times to avoid self-fertilization. All right, now that we've covered the basic blueprint, let's meet a few of the key members of this Porifera family. First up, we have Cycon. This is sort of the classic textbook example. Then there's Spongilla, who's kind of the adventurer of the group, since it's one of the very few sponges to live in freshwater. And of course, you have Euspongia. This is the common bath sponge, the one that's famous for that softest spongin skeleton we just talked about. I know those names can be a bit tricky to remember, so here's a little helpful trick. Just think of the phrase Cycon sponges everywhere. It's a great way to recall Cycon, Spongilla, and Euspongia. You know, it's really easy to look at this simple design and just dismiss it as primitive. But think about this number for a second. 600 million. Sponges have been using this exact blueprint to thrive on our planet for over 600 million years. They were here long before the dinosaurs, long before the first trees, and they are still here today. And that really leaves us with a final thought, doesn't it? We so often associate success in evolution with complexity, bigger brains, faster muscles. But the sponge, an animal with no brain, no mouth, and no muscles, has outlasted countless creatures that were way more complex. So, what does their incredible endurance teach us about what it really means to win the game of life?